Announcement for the regular listeners of the podcast. I'm going to try something new. I'm going to take the ads off of the podcast in hopes that you guys will appreciate that and become patrons. You see, podcasts cost money to put out, especially after you get out so many episodes and take up so much space. Without getting into too much of how the sausage is made, they cost money for you to hear them. Now, you guys know that I don't take sponsors. I refuse sponsors if you've listened for any length of time, because you shall take no bribe. A bribe blinds the eyes, the words, and twists the words of the righteous. But podcasts are put out by hosting companies, and they charge money to put the podcast out. In order to offset that, they'll put in ads, and those ads generate revenue, and that kind of helps for the podcast. But I don't know what those ads are. They're tailored to your algorithm and where you live, so they don't influence the content. But I'm going to try, I think for 40 days, I'm going to try taking out any ads and paying for the podcast out of my pocket, in hopes that this good free will gesture will encourage you guys to become patrons to support the podcast. If I get in this 40 days as much or more than I've made, well, I think that'll work out better for everybody. And if you don't know Patreon, if you're not a patron of anybody else, that's basically a website where I put a lot of content out there that you're just not going to get as a regular listener. There's a lot of special episodes, a lot of special content, videos, pictures. As an example, there are 4,384 posts that I've made on Patreon over the years, as a thank you to those that want to support the podcast. There used to be a $1 a month tier. Patreon got rid of that. I think now the lowest is $5 a month. If you cannot afford $5 a month, and I don't mean that facetiously, like if you're struggling to feed your family, then by all means, listen and don't feel guilty about it. I work as a private security contractor as my primary breadwinning job, so it's not like you're taking money out of my family's mouth. If you enjoy the podcast and want to support the podcast, not being a shill for some cheap Chinese optic company or telling you to buy whatever a bunch of other social media influencers are buying, and trying to keep it fair and unbiased. If you appreciate that, if you appreciate the podcast and the content, and you think it's worth $5 a month, please consider in this season of ad-free. That's me trying to say I value your time, and I'm going to try and get rid of the ads and hope that you'll become a patron because you value my time and the time that I put into the podcast. So consider becoming a patron. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. Either way, enjoy the content. Urban Survival Firearms. Patreon picks. Your guys' choices. What are you packing for the apocalypse? And maybe some of my thoughts on that. That's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to the podcast. We talk about this topic, hopefully the right way, with God Almighty at the center, biblical Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. On that, I am blessed to serve you as host. First and foremost, I'm a Christian, military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, competition shooting, hunting, some other stuff, bio bullet points in the show notes. With that, let's just dig right in. Take a big old spoonful of your guys' pick for urban survival firearms. Talking about specifically a long gun and a handgun, if you had to pick. Now, Kevin says his choice is going to be an AR-15 and a Canik something. Now, I would never, ever encourage you. I don't want to encourage you to buy Turkish firearms. Muslims have been trying to kill us and take our women for about 1,200 years, and the fact of giving them money to improve their weapons manufacturing seems like a bad idea. That said, the guns work fine. Mechanic makes a good handgun. They, as far as form and function and the machine goes, they work fine. So for just as far as functionality goes, a fine weapon. On the AR-15, yeah, what kind? I mean, that's the de facto fighting rifle of our time, right? The AR-15 has been around since the 1950s. It's as classic as a 1957 Chevy. Forget if it came out in 57 or 59, somewhere around there. It's the one to beat, right? But what kind? What are we talking AR-15? There's a lot of different AR-15s out there. We're just talking about a basic M4 clone. Are we talking, a PSA or Daniel Defense? We're talking a 16-inch, a 20-inch. So, but yeah, AR-15 is definitely the one to beat. I will imagine that will be the most popular long gun in these comments. But a good combo, a good practical combo on that. And that was from Kevin. Let's look at some other ones, shall we? Let's look at an Arsenal SAM 7 side folder AK and an HKP30 V1, and then it says the LEM trigger. I'm with you all the way except for the LEM trigger, but an AK Arsenal SAM 7, yeah. Arsenal makes a good AK. SAM 7, I'm not the AK nerd that knows all the different models, but if it's an Arsenal, good gun. Side folding AK, good gun. Now, my thing on this is, when I was growing up or even into the early 2000s, the AK was kind of like the prepper gun because the guns were cheap and available on the, surplus Cold War market. Arsenals were always decent money. But the ammunition also is very available and affordable. You could get it in Spam cans and crates. You could get a bunch of military surplus stuff. With the war in Ukraine and us picking fights with Russia and all this other stuff and, banning imports, that's no longer the case. But that said, I think I've said before, I think as far as common military intermediate cartridges go, the 7.62x39 is probably the best terminal performance intermediate cartridge. Some of that is negated by the cheap manufacture of the ammo, but really good, high quality 7.62x39 is fantastic as an intermediate cartridge. And obviously the AK-47 is legendary for its reliability. And an Arsenal is an actual AK. It's not just a gun that's imported by some cheap importer that looks like an AK. I would consider an Arsenal every bit as good as an actual military, like Russian military AK-47. So that's a fantastic choice there. So yeah, good on you there. I like the HKP30. I'm not big on the LEM trigger, but I like an HKP30. And that was from Roscoe. James says a 1911 and an M1 Garand. Old school. Going old school there. I like it. I like a 1911. I like the platform. I'm not big on the old GI 1911s. I don't like the lack of a good beaver tail, and I don't like the vestigial kind of just barely there sights. But you could put good modern sights on there. You put a good modern beaver tail on there, and 1911 still ready to rock and roll. M1 Garand. I mean, I'm not big on that. Yeah, sure, it served us well in 2 world wars. But unless you do some adaptations of the M1 Garand, it's not going to fire modern 30-06. It's only going to be reliable to fire the M1 load, the old M1 service load. It's not. That's a lot less powerful than modern 30-06. So 30-06 is a fantastic cartridge. It's one of my favorite cartridges, period, like on the planet. So I like that, but the fact that you can't fire modern 30-06 out of it without breaking it, without damaging the gun, I probably wouldn't count on that today. But if that's what you want and you got a bunch of M1, full metal jacket service loads and that's what you want to use, or you hand load a bunch of service loads, fantastic, right? It's not, old school pick there. A 1911 and an M1 Garand. Another one I got, a Glock 19 and a Kel-Tec sub 2K. Blast from the past here. We're going, what is it, retro? That's probably retro, right? But at this point, a Glock 19 and a Kel-Tec sub 2. It says sub 2J. I'm pretty sure he meant sub 2K, and it self-corrected there. But Kel-Tec sub 2Ks, these have been a mainstay in the prepper community almost as much as like an AK-47. If you're not familiar with the sub 2K, Kel-Tec made some really cool guns that I really like, and some guns that I just shake my head and I'm like, what are they doing? But this is one of the ones I like. Kel-Tec sub 2K. If you don't know, it's a folding pistol caliber carbine, and unlike a lot of like pistol caliber carbines, like a lever action that weighs, as much as a full powered rifle, these are really light. They're really handy. They fold. They'll fit in a backpack. They're affordable. I'm not going to knock them for being affordable. They're a straight blowback, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it does make them simple. They're simple, they're reliable, they're cheap, they're lightweight. What else can you really say about them, right? The newer gens let you mount optics pretty easily and still fold up. So it's I think they're on the Gen 3 now. I could be wrong about that. I don't own a Kel-Tec sub 2K, but they've been around a long time. They've been a staple in the prepper community. And the Glock 19 is like the Honda Civic of handguns. Like, it's just the plain vanilla, get the job done, no frills, reliable. He didn't say what gen it was. I know they're all Glock 19s, but there's a big difference between like a Gen 4 and a Gen 5. Kel-Tec sub 2K and a Glock 19. And I put as a comment on his thing, ammo commonality, right? Because they'll both use 9x19. And if he's got the Kel-Tec sub 2K that takes Glock mags, he can use the same magazines. So, hey, that's pretty cool too, right? I think that's commonly overstated in the prepper sphere of like, I can use the same mags. Like, I say use the best tool for the job. I'd rather have a rifle powered for my long gun. If I'm using a rifle, I'd rather have a rifle caliber than a pistol caliber. But hey, that's just me. For an urban, this is urban survival, right? What are you hunting, rats and cats for your food? So you're probably not hunting with it. You're probably using it for defense. It's a fine. Kel-Tec sub 2K is a fine pick, especially for like a lightweight get home bag gun. It's kind of ideal for that. So that's pretty cool. We got one here from that. Oh, and that was RJ. The next one here is from Luke. Luke says debate between SKS and a Maverick 88. Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there. You're not playing the game. This is a thought experiment. You got to pick one. Yeah, with caveats. I could pick the best gun for just about any circumstance. You got to pick one, man. You got to go with the SKS, also a prepper staple from my youth. The poor man's redneck poaching gun of my youth, because they were dirt cheap and the ammo was dirt cheap. SKSs, I would consider a rifle as opposed to like a kind of semi-auto submachine gun stand-in like the AK-47. SKS is a fine rifle. I think they're really unappreciated. It used to be, under $100 or, $110 or $150. And then now they're, $500, $600, $700, $1,000 for an SKS. I still think they're a good value. They're a military grade. They're not like a lot of the AKs that get chopped up and then put together by some importer. They're actual military firearms. A Chinese or a Russian SKS is a fine military grade semi-automatic rifle. I think they're still kind of undervalued. I think they're probably worth $1,500 for like a good pristine Norinco or a Russian SKS. They're phenomenal guns. I don't even own one, and I've thought about buying them several times, but they're still a good gun. Or the Maverick 88. The Maverick 88 is the like budget pump shotgun to beat. Right? It's not made in Turkey. It's not some Turk nasty clone. By guys that want to cut your heads off and take your daughters and your wives away from you. It's good American made. It might have some parts made in Mexico. I don't remember, but I think it's made in the U.S. and Texas. Maverick 88, good pump shotgun. It's kind of the budget version of the Mossberg 500. It's a phenomenal shotgun. They're good. The fit and finish is not great, but as far as utility goes, they're a workhorse. They're a great shotgun. So you got to decide whether you want the versatility of a shotgun or the firepower of the SKS, right? I'm a big fan of the shotgun. So there's that. And he said, I'll do Smith & Wesson M&P 9mm as a pistol. Hey, can't fault you for that. I have won more shooting competitions with a Smith & Wesson M&P than any other handgun. phenomenal handgun, every bit as reliable as a Glock. I'd say maybe even more so, at least as reliable, and I like their extractor a lot better. And they certainly have way better ergonomics. So I cannot fault you for that right there. And we got one from John. Oh, that was from Luke. And then we got one from John R. I just bought an 11.5 AR pistol for this very purpose. It's a new truck gun that stays with a plate carrier. Yeah. And then I replied, what handgun? But let me talk about that. The 11.5 AR. I have one of these that I used when I was the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters. It's a phenomenal urban fighting gun. Now, not all the time. Sometimes I would take, a pretty standard M4 type gun, and sometimes I would take a SCAR-17 when I was the commander of a tactical team, depending on the mission, right? Am I doing a DMR mission? Am I doing an executive protection, working with Secret Service type mission? Like, which one of those things am I doing? And how long do I have to carry it, right? Because I have to carry it on me for 12 hours, a 12-hour shift. That 11.5 is a lot handier than the SCAR-17, the SCAR Heavy, right? But they have different missions. Again, there are some times where I would take that over a SCAR-17 or over a 16-inch. Not all the time, but sometimes. They're light, handy, they're maneuverable, right? If you're doing EP work, if you're doing convoy work, if you're doing work in tight, confined spaces, that 11.5 is nice. Not that you can't do it, right? I'm Marine Corps urban warfare instructor. Marines are known as being some of the best door kickers on the planet. They historically have done that with 20-inch AR-15s or M16s. M16, when I was in, M16A2 and then an M16A4. Kicking down doors all day long in Iraq with 20-inch barreled ARs, or actual M16s, but we would say AR-15s, right? Let's not get too hung up on the nomenclature. So you don't need it for urban warfare, urban combat, but that 11.5 is really nice. And a 11.5, 10-something, that's about as short as I like to go on an AR, because that will still let you get a carbine length gas system, which is very proven. It's a little violent, but it's very proven. If you get any shorter than that, you have to go with something off the rails, different gas systems, which are not as proven. So that's about as short as I like to go in a direct impingement system. You go shorter than that, you might want to go with a 300 black, or you might want to go with a piston system. It just for reasons, right? But and then I said, what about the handgun? And he said, I'm sticking with the old Glock 19 Gen 5. That I guess a Gen 5 is old at this point, right? Excess minimalist sights, my custom fitted palm swell, a hockey tape. So a Glock 19 again, the Briars Vanilla, the Honda Civic of handguns. So can't fault you for that. But yeah, the AR pistol, right? Air quotes, pistol brace. Not a bad gun. My caveat to that, truck gun, like in my vehicle gun right now, I've got a full 20-inch rifle AR. And an M16, it's a Colt AR-15 M4, right? It's like what I used in the Marine Corps. I've got it behind my seat. And it's a full rifle. Why? Because my vehicle is carrying it. And if I have to walk all the way home, I'm not going to mind the extra weight of the longer barrel. If it's my vehicle's carrying it, I'm not super worried about it. If I have to carry it on my person day after day after day, right? I still work as a private security contractor. If I was walking around with it for 12 hours, which I'm generally not, I would go with something lighter. But my current truck gun is that right now. But for a truck gun, if your truck's carrying it, yeah, if you just want to go with a smaller, lighter, handier gun, again, nothing wrong with that. And then, so this is a whole other person. Evan says, an 11.5 AR-15 with a compact suppressor, Surefire Scout, but you know how I feel about suppressors. Troy folding sights, Geisley SSA 2-stage trigger. It's a good trigger. Optic tossed up between an EOTech and a primary arms 1-8. Magpul BCM. Okay, gets into some other parts. 55 grain VMAX. I'm not a big fan of the VMAX for defense, but it'll work. And then pistol, Baby Glock 43X, 15-round magazines. Okay, so a lot of detail here. One thing I would say, I wouldn't go with a 1-8. I almost never go above a 4 power unless it's like a elk hunting rifle. But and then I don't think I own anything over 9 power. No, I don't. But a 1-8 is a fat obese scope on a little tiny 11-inch AR. I don't know why you'd want an 8 power on a AR pistol. But if you do, you do. That's fine. That's you. And EOTech, they're fine. They're classic, right? But they're pretty big, heavy optic. You could probably get a much smaller, sleeker optic if you want a small, sleek pistol, AR pistol, right? So you might look at a smaller optic, but hey, if that's what you like, if that's what you have, I generally like an LPVO, but I mean, on an AR pistol, a 1-8's a bit much. So even on a full powered like 20-inch rifle, a standard 5.56 round is not doing great after about 600 meters. So, and you can do that with irons. We shot out the 550 yard Marine Corps expert qualification, qualified as expert. We shot 550 yards with iron sights with no rest, right? So you don't need that magnification out to 600 yards. So I think you're just adding a bunch of weight on there. But where was I going with that? So yeah, that's a big heavy optic, and that's with a 20-inch barrel. You're cutting it down to 11.5. You're dropping a lot of velocity off of that round. Also, on that, the VMAX is meant to work at high velocity. It's a varmint cartridge. So test that and make sure that's going to do okay out of an 11.5. You're kind of in uncharted territory there. But yeah, other than that, I mean, it seems like you've got a lot into your accessories. You've thought about it. I'm not a big fan of the baby Glocks. I'm not a big fan of the 43. I bought one when they first came out. Almost immediately sold it. It's a Glock, which I don't like, and it's a baby Glock, subcompact, little teeny baby gun, which I'm not a big fan of anyway. But hey, if that's what you like. Also, if it's for I usually tell you to carry a full-size fighting handgun. Even a Glock 19 is a compact. I'd say get a man-sized gun, at least a 17. That's a regular-sized Glock, right? But hey, if you're going to go with a baby gun, go with a baby gun. There might be, maybe you got to keister it in the apocalypse. I don't know. But maybe you're worried about deep concealment. But hey, a lot of people carry the Glock 43. I know that it's convenient. I know that it's thin. So, there's that. But yeah, as long as you got it and you're running it and you're training with it, I would not be super concerned about it. All right, what else? What else here? Let's see. Okay, I just read we got some questions on urban survival. I did another post on Patreon. If you want to ask questions and stuff like that, Patreon's the best place to go. There should be a link in the show notes. But I got some questions here about urban survival. So I'm going to read those. I just saw that we had some questions, so I haven't given this a lot of deep thought, right? But I'm going to try and answer some of your questions here. What are the most dangerous groups type of people to be ready to deal with after things go sideways? So street gangs come to mind, right? Traditional tribal warlords, they come to power in fallen cities. Look what happened in my own experience in Baghdad after we liberated, destroyed that society. Or liberated, depending on your political point of view or whatever. But warlords took over, right? Radical Muslims, started doing radical Muslim, not even radical, just regular Muslims started doing Muslim things, meaning cutting people's heads off and taking women and taking little girls and little boys and doing horrible things with them because there was no rule of law. I would like to think that we still, as America here, are a Christian country. We were founded as a Christian nation. I don't care what you think, that's the truth. I don't know how many people today are still that way. But seeing our major cities, again, I was L.A.P.D, worked some specialized assignments. There are criminal gangs now running large parts of the city that only pretend to, bend a knee to law enforcement. When law enforcement's not a thing, those guys are going to run you. So, yeah, street gangs, depending on where you are, MS-13, whoever's doing the major drug activity, human trafficking activity in your city. And if you live in a city of more than 100,000 people, they're already doing that now. So just expect for them to run the show and be pleasantly surprised if they're not. But, yeah, they're super dangerous. So, major street gangs, whether that's motorcycle gangs that are doing the meth trade or your Asian gangs doing the fentanyl stuff or your Hispanic gangs doing a lot of the drug stuff and cartel stuff and human trafficking stuff. They're likely doing that now. So they're probably just going to expand. So yeah, those are pretty dangerous. Also I don't just mean like skipping a meal or like fasting. I'm talking about actual starving to death. Those people will do horrible things, and there's not any food in the cities. Like, that will be gone very quickly. That's, cities import food from other places. So when that food runs out, I would suspect that a big chunk of the population is going to be violent. I would encourage you to read a book entitled Survival Theory 2. It's the second one, but I'm telling you to read that one first. Survival Theory 2. It's a big chunk of that book is case studies of modern human starvation in urban areas. And the stories in there are just, they'll stick with you. Don't read that if you don't have a strong stomach, but it's some horrible, horrible stuff. So yeah, people starving to death, which don't think that can happen today. Famine is a thing, and it's a thing biblically, right? So yeah, famine, people starving to death, they'll do horrible things. So those groups of people. Not to mention a bunch of people now are on psychotropic medications, and they're not going to get those. I've dealt with a lot of people with mental disorders, and they can be very violent. When you have a big chunk of the population now that's on mind-altering drugs and they suddenly don't get those, I don't even know what that's going to do. So have fun with that in the cities. Water procurement in the city. Historically, a lot of times when there's a war or a disaster, like an earthquake in like a third world or something, or hurricanes, a lot of times the dirty water kills or gives more casualties than the actual disaster. The water's probably going to be contaminated. When people's toilets don't flush, stuff's going to get contaminated. When they start going to the bathroom anywhere they can, and it runs into all the water that you're going to be able to get, that's going to be a major issue. One of the reasons I don't encourage you to live in cities. Right now, most cities, you're drinking recycled feces. You're drinking recycled wastewater. Whereas if you live in the country like I do, I have 3 sources of water, and I generally drink out of a well. A lot of cities, you're drinking recycled feces and urine. That's what your community thinks about you. That's what your powers that be that provide for you think about you. You're drinking recycled feces. Have fun with that. What do you think is going to happen after the disaster when that's not purified? When people are going to the bathroom everywhere. So pretty much any kind of water on the surface or anything, I would not count on that. If you're really in a pinch, the back of a toilet, probably the cleaner water. And if you can punch open a water tank, like a hot water heater, if the grid is down, you can get water out of a water heater, even if there's obviously no grid. Those generally store quite a bit of water, so you could look there. Other than that, maybe rain collection on a roof, depending on how urban you're talking. But if it's any kind of surface water shortly after a disaster, man, I would stay away from that. So yeah, dysentery. I've never had it. I've had giardia, and I could definitely see how that could kill you. So beware of dirty water. It kills a lot of people. Probably a lot more than bullets post-disaster. So don't overlook that. Let's see here. What are the best uses for each gun in a battery? Pistol, rifle, shotgun. Talking about urban survival. Well, I'll briefly touch on a handgun. The best use for a handgun is because you can have it on you all the time, just like today, right? It's the most convenient. It's really not better for anything else other than you can use it one-handed, like if you're doing something else, like dragging a buddy out of a room after he's been shot. But long guns are better, period. The only good thing about a handgun is that you can have it on you. They're harder to shoot. They're less effective. They're less powerful. But you can have them on you. They're convenient. That's the use of a handgun. That's not going to change. Now, rifle versus shotgun, obviously if you're talking about out past 150 yards, then yeah, the rifle is better. If you're talking about a battlefield, you want a battle rifle, period. If you think the apocalypse is going to be Red Dawn, you probably want a battle rifle. Now, shotgun is more versatile. Small game, large game, and there'll be game in the cities, right? Pigeons, doves, things like that. deer will probably be gone pretty quickly, but smaller game will be around. So there will be protein sources you can procure with a shotgun, and a shotgun is versatile. Anything from a mourning dove to a grizzly bear with a shotgun. It's more versatile. Also, it's a breaching round, so you can breach with it. It's a universal key, right? You can open a lot of doors with a shotgun. So there's that. Slugs, buckshot, it is the most effective, in my opinion, man-stopping tool inside a, say, 125, 100. You could argue whether it's 100, 150 meters. But with the right ammunition, it is a fight stopper. So if you want that fight over quickly, the shotgun is it. That's the ammunition's heavy. So, there's some trade-offs there. But those are the big uses I would see, post a big event in an urban environment. So there's that. Good questions. And then I got a God bless. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that. I am a blessed man. I hope that you guys are as well. With that, let's start wrapping this up here. On your urban survival firearms and questions. With that, we talked about dirty water. We talked about guns. Not every problem is solved with a gun. I love guns. I love them for a lot of reasons. They're a tool for me, right? That's, by God's grace, the Bible and a gun I provide pretty well for the family. But they don't solve every problem. I would submit you or I, would trade every firearm that I had if I was dying of gangrene or my wife was dying of gangrene or a child was dying of infection. Antibiotics. Get those. Store those for your fish in the apocalypse, right? So, how much would you give for a curing dose of penicillin if you had an infection that was going to kill you, right? Infections killed a lot of people pre-antibiotics. Antibiotics are cheap right now, and they're worth their weight in gold, or probably way more than that. So consider that. I don't think it's talked about enough. So that's your tactical tip. Research some antibiotics, common uses, what they can be used for. Good broad-spectrum antibiotics, penicillin, amoxicillin, doxycycline, things like that, and doses and stuff like that. Get to know that for your fish, right? Fish need antibiotics too. So with that, that's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. How about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? You'll find this in Genesis 19. The two men said to Lot, "Do you have anyone else here? Sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place." That reminds me of Revelation 18. Come out of her, my people. Just some thoughts there. You should pray and think about where God wants you to live. Right? There are legit reasons to live in urban centers, to help other people, to evangelize to other people. But I don't know you and I don't know your circumstances, so don't do what I think is best for you. Do what God tells you to do. And the way to understand that is to read your Bible and pray. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.